Hi there, and welcome to the seventh episode of Career Stories Live. So, I am here today with Annette Richmond. So, welcome, Annette. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Sarah. We've chatted before, and it's always such a treat to chat with you. And so, I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I've just seen a comment coming through from Jeff already. So, Jeff saying, as Annette recently said, let's get this party started. No pressure, Jeff. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. So, as always, please do comment to let us know that you're here, where you're joining from. And if you want to ask any questions or share your experiences, then please do so in the comments. That's whether you're watching now live or later on the replay. So Annette and I was just looking back, and it was a year ago, Annette, that we connected on LinkedIn. I think it was after you saw me talking on Gillian's show, and then
Yes,
you invited me back on yours. So
yes. I find a lot of interesting people on Jillian's show. And so I was lucky to get to know you.
yeah, it's really, really good. So the basis for these lives, just for anyone that's not watched before, so I've just always been really interested in people's careers and how they've got to where they are now. So I really enjoy learning about career roles and sort of career paths. So that's what gave me the idea. And the aim really is just to inspire thought about what people could do. And then hopefully my guests can come on and give some advice to people about their kind of career tips. So in the kind of the intro, Annette gave me loads of information about the roles that she's done. So personal branding for executive, bartending, magazine writing, recruiting, lecturing, getting her MA in Psych, working in the career space. So there's loads there. So Annette, do you want to just kind of start with a brief intro to you and what it is you're doing right now?
So right now, my business has evolved into being personal branding, and I work with executives and entrepreneurs on their LinkedIn profile, a resume if they need it, do a little bit of LinkedIn training, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I've just got a few people saying hello. So Paul is sitting in the kitchen, just around the corner. We have got Alison. So Alison's watching with interest. Thank you, Alison. John Asterian, good to see us
Oh,
both. And discovered you via Clubhouse. So do you still on Clubhouse and that?
no, not so. No,
No,
I haven't been on Clubhouse in ages, but yes,
no.
I'm done.
Yeah. And Craig Allen. So Craig's coming on in February. So he's looking forward to this as well. So that's great. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Okay, so I'm really interested in the bartending thing, Annette. So could you just tell us about this? Because you said in the background that it really helped you in comms. So do you want to just kind of give us a bit of a background as to what you did? And
Oh, sure, sure. So I was one of those people with no direction, and so when I enrolled in college after high school, I didn't even last a semester. I was there. It was just not working for me, and so I had a good friend of mine, still a friend of mine. We were cheerleaders together in high school,
oh,
who was bartending, and she said, it's fun. You can make a lot of money. And so I said, okay, that sounds good. And so I did that for much of the time in my 20s and when I was going to school. And one of the things that I always feel that it was so important is I was kind of shy when I was in high school. But bartending, when you're at a bar, your job is to talk to people. I mean, that's what you're there for, particularly if you're working like a Sunday afternoon during a football game or even at night in a disco bar. And because I did both, part of your job is to talk to people. And so I became comfortable and feeling like I was able to talk to anyone. I still feel like that today. And so it really helped me build my communication skills. I did make a lot of money. I did have a lot of fun. My bartending gig led me to also be a fill-in DJ because I was bartending at a sort of a disco bar. And when the DJ went on, had a night off or a couple of nights off, I used to fill in, which was, oh my gosh, so much fun. But I will say you know, after I went back to college, when I finally decided, I was sitting with my friends in a diner because that's what you do when you're bartending. You get out of, work at 2 a.m. in the morning and you go and have dinner at the local diner. And, I saw the drunk sitting there who, I had waited on myself. And I decided, you know what? I don't want to be the diner waitress. So I think it's time for me to go back to school and kind of look into doing something different. Which after I graduated, I got my dream job and I was a magazine writer. And I always, as I always have mentioned that, throughout my career, I feel like a lot of my experiences have kind of built on each other. So being comfortable just talking to people allowed me to be comfortable at the magazine where I had to interview company CEOs. I worked in the luggage and leather and travel goods industries. So I would be interviewing the CEO of Tumi or someone high up in Travel Pro or something like that. And going to trade shows and covering them. And so that whole communication really, really helped with that.
Oh, that's cool. So your bartending stories are just like I'm picturing all these like American teen films at the moment. So cheerleading, I'm massively jealous of that. That was something I always wanted to do. It wasn't really a thing in the UK, but yeah, I always used to watch the films and think, oh, that looks so cool. So I'm very jealous of that.
It kind of was, especially when we would go to the away games with the team and sit on the players' laps, but then again,
Yeah.
it was a much tamer time then than it is today.
Yeah, but and I guess the bartending thing, it's a really good point you've made about, if you don't like talking to people, actually that's perfect, isn't it? So if you're someone maybe that's got an introversion preference, then actually forcing yourself into that kind of role is going to massively help you, isn't it? And
It does. I mean, I bartended. I also did some waitressing or serving, and one of the things that I think is important to having spent some time doing that is you really have respect for the people that do. I have run into people, I'm sure you have as well, that think, oh, that's someone just tending bar, oh, that's a waitress just serving us. But when you are waiting on, a section of tables and you have to keep everybody's order in your mind and you have to keep, everybody happy, it is a good training ground. I think
mm,
any public facing role is can be really, really helpful for people who are nervous about talking to other people or just need to get out of their shell a little bit.
yeah, agree. We've been talking to my son actually. He's 17, looking for like a part-time job, and we're sort of suggesting to him something in hospitality or retail. So I never did any kind of hospitality work, but I did work in a shop, and it was great learning, really. You kind of get to deal with people at their best and their worst, people at
Yes.
Christmas that have left all their shop until the last minute, so you have
Uh-huh.
to deal with all of that. So that's cool. So got a couple more comments. So Jeff is saying, no wonder you're great at communicating, Annette. Bartenders are great
Oh,
listeners.
thank you.
Cool. And Paul is saying a fellow DJ. So yeah, Paul's doing quite a lot of DJing at the moment, which is good. So excellent. Okay, so bartending, magazine writing. So actually, that was going to be one of my questions about people that are wanting to start out working in sort of communications, marketing, that kind of thing. So have you got any advice for people that are looking to do that?
Well, I would say to keep plugging at it, um and I'll tell you the story when I was looking for a job writing, because that was my goal. I wanted to work in advertising or for a magazine or something along those lines. And I did interview for one job before I was hired for the one I got. And I went in and I interviewed. I was one of the last people. It was just down to two of us, or maybe three of us, but I think two. And had were given an assignment to do over the weekend to prepare a little presentation or something. And I was so excited and I was so close and I was, just knew I was going to get that job, and I didn't get the job. And of
Oh,
course, I was so, so disappointed. But I ended up getting a job that was even better. And when I this was in the early 90s, so we were still having ads in the newspapers then. It was just kind of the internet wasn't even around really yet
mm,
for the general public. And I remember I applied because there were a lot of blind ads in the paper. And I applied for the magazine writing job and I never heard anything from them. And an ad came up in the paper about 6 months later. It was the same company. I had no idea. And that time they called me in, they interviewed me, and they hired me. And so I guess it's just, be persistent, don't get discouraged. Jobs like that are very competitive. But I will also say that when I was a magazine writer, I made no money when I was just
Mm.
starting. So I was bartending at night to pay my rent because I was single at the time. And
Right. Okay.
so, you have to be, I would say, prepared for that. I mean, I haven't been in that position for a long time, but um, to just not get discouraged because there's always something else out there. But I will say also that having sort of sharing your uh, transferable skills. For example, I had that bartending background, I had that service background, so I was very comfortable communicating, and I think that helped me get the job, and I know it helped me in the job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've seen quite a lot of articles recently actually about how many times should you apply for your dream company. I think you've made a really good point there. And I guess the second time you didn't even know you'd done it. But I was reading about people that have applied for 6, 7 times for places like Google and then they finally get in. And I think that's the thing. If it's your dream, you need to keep going, don't you?
Well, absolutely. And, I'm sure you tell people you work with, and I tell them the same. If you are applying and you have that relationship, keep in touch with those people because you never know. You never know what can happen. And I will share with you the reason that they had the ad in the paper again was because, and when I went in, they gave me a writing test. And the reason they did that is because the person they had hired the first time had submitted some samples, and they found out after having her go with them to a trade show that she couldn't write a sentence.
Wow.
So you never know that even if you don't get the job, the person who was hired may not work out for a variety of reasons. And so if you keep in touch, that can help you, be there,
Definitely.
top of
Definitely. Yeah.
mind if the person doesn't work out.
Yeah, and I had 2 clients last year that actually that happened, so they were both second place, essentially, so they didn't get the job because someone else did, and both times the other person then one of them didn't even start and the other one resigned, so then my clients both got those roles, so yeah, and both loving it. So it's definitely worth keeping going. So a couple of my comments. So Alison saying you make an amazing cheerleader. So thank you, Alison. A bit old now. And Jeff, never give up, never surrender. Okay, and then we've got a question from Lisa saying, any advice for people wanting to break into CPG? I am trying to get into JM Smuckers. I don't actually know what CPG is. Do you know, Annette?
Yeah, it's consumer products.
Oh, okay, fine. Is there anything you can give advice in with?
I think it's the same advice that I would give to anyone is to try to network your way in, to find if that's your job. You can look them up on LinkedIn. You can find other people that work there, connections, second degree connections. And as you know, Sarah, if you go in with a referral, you have a much, much better shot than if you're just blindly applying to an ad with them. So that's
Yeah.
what I would recommend for any type of any type of company.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say, yeah, go to the company page on LinkedIn, and at the top you'll see there it's got a link to employees. If you click on that, you get a list of all the employees in the company, and you can add some filters in. So you could filter on CPG or the
Mhm,
type of role that you're
mhm,
looking for,
mhm.
and it'll give you a list of the people that are already doing that. So I would definitely recommend going down that route. And as Annette says, look for second degree connections because then you'll be able to see who you've got in common, and then
Mhm.
try to get in that way. So thank you for asking the question, Lisa. Okay, so jumping around a bit here, I know, but the MA in Psych. So, do you want to tell us a bit about that? What made you decide to do that? How did you do it?
So, I had the job at the magazine, and I did love it. I stayed there for a few years. I learned so much. I learned more from my boss there than I ever learned really in school about writing. And
Mm.
I just want to mention that when I started working there, because I had gone back to school later, my boss was like a decade younger than me, but so much years wiser and smarter than I am. And so I think that was a good lesson to me too, that, to not be judging people on their age and their knowledge, because it definitely doesn't always match up. So after I left the magazine, I did some freelance work for a while. I had one company and I would write an article for them a quarter and things like that. And I decided that I wanted to go back to school and get a master's in psych. I'm interested in people. I've always been interested in people, kind of, myself, what makes me tick, what makes other people tick. And so I actually went to school while I was working full time, went to school in the evenings, which I had done to get my bachelor's as well, because I was single then. When I got my master's, I was married, so that made it a little bit easier. But that's how I did that. And when I got out, um, I just wanted to get, a job in the field. And I interviewed at a lot of different places. And that's how I ended up landing in the career field. My first position was as a vocational counselor for a training and placement facility for chronically mentally ill. Now,
Wow.
part of what I did to get that job, of course, I had my degree that I was just completing, but I also sold them on the idea of writing, because one of the positions at this nonprofit was to be writing reports on the clients we worked with. And so I was able to tell them how, sell my ability to write and to interview and talk to people, which helped me get the job. Um, the clients that we had come in, it was a 12-week program. They were the most dedicated clients I've ever worked with. It was a sort of a mainstream type facility where the clients that we worked with, I would teach them some basic business skills. Teacher, always wanted to do some teaching,
Mm.
love that. And we did a lot of professional development. We did assessments and things like that. And some of the clients that came into our program, they had to apply and be approved through the state to come there. Um, they would take a bus from their, a group home maybe they were living in or living with their family, a bus to the train, a train, a half an hour, and then take a bus from the train to our facility, every day, because they were just so dedicated. And that really kind of influenced how I think about people that I work with today. And we talked a little bit about that before we came live. So that's how I landed in the career field. And I ended up working online because anyone who has worked in nonprofit knows you have a lot of need and you have no money. So the internet was just starting. This was in the late 1990s. And I went online to find information because, you wanted things you could download and use at your business. And there wasn't much. And so when I ended up leaving that facility, I went from nonprofit to for profit. I ended up starting a career site, and that's how I ended up online.
Wow. So early
Long-winded story
adopter.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. So I think there's loads of things to pick up in there. So I think firstly, kind of going back to school after you've been working, that's really interesting. And I was reading a book or listening to a book, Daniel Pink's book about regret, and saying that loads of people's regret is about their education. So I think
Mhm.
what you just said there is just a really good point, is that it's not too late just because you finished school years ago. Whatever your age, you can go back and retrain or restudy or whatever it is. So that's cool.
Absolutely. And I will say, because it can be kind of daunting, when I decided to go back and get a bachelor's, I didn't jump right in and sign up for the
Mm,
degree. I went there, I took a couple of classes, kind of see how it goes. Then I enrolled and matriculated into an associate's, a 2-year program, and I did that. And
mm,
then once I finished that, I took a little bit of a break, and then I went back and did the second 2 years. And so, I think that the idea of a lot of the things that we think about doing can seem overwhelming, but if
mm.
you break it down into chunks and do things a bit at a time,
Yeah.
I think it's for me, it certainly was easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also you've got your life experience as well. So you've got so much more experience to reflect on, haven't you, when you're doing some of these big topics?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked, and you just sort of touched a little bit on values. So not going to spend too much time on it, but do you have, your personal values? Do you think they have an impact on the type of work that you take on or the clients you've worked with?
Well, I do think that that working with those clients definitely had had influenced me on the people that I like to work with. I like to work with
Mm,
people who are dedicated. I mentioned briefly that, I worked for the nonprofit, then I worked for a for-profit, and the for-profit was also sort of a government-funded program, but the people that came to that program, they didn't have to pay for it. And I will tell you that I found out that they did not really appreciate it because they did not pay. And so that sort of I always think about that there has to be, even if it's low, there needs to be something. But as we talked about earlier, I want to work with clients who are going to be dedicated, who are willing to actually do the work as well. And I'm sure the clients that you work with, like with me, I'm not a fiction writer. So
mm,
I need to get the information. I write everything from scratch for my clients. And so I rely on the information they give to me. And if clients, when I talk to them initially, and they don't quite seem to understand that, there's a lot of work on their part as well, then, I often feel that they're not a good fit for me because it's a partnership. And I
yeah.
make sure that people understand that they can't just come to me and pay me and have me just
Mm.
make it up out of my head.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we were talking about particularly when you're self-employed, I think is, people that are valuing your time and
Mhm.
turning up for meetings and all and responding to you. It's really, yeah, it's a really big lesson to learn, I think, when you work for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And as we discussed briefly, the idea of having a calendar, I use a
Mm.
calendar because it saves that time of, oh, Sarah, Tuesday at 4. No, that doesn't work for me. How about Friday at 2? No, and going back and forth like that. And I do have sometimes people that'll contact me and I send them my calendar link. And if they don't want to, go that step into the calendar, then I know they're probably not a good fit for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. It is interesting the Calendly thing. I think because I do still use paper, but I have started using Calendly for this as a kind of a trial. But I am going to start introducing it for my actual work as well because yeah, as you say, it saves a lot of time, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, I've seen another couple of comments coming through now. So Jeff is saying, how do you use that MA in Psych in what you do now, Annette?
Well, it's working with people. I kind of feel like the writing background, and the, my education and my experience works together to work with people that I do today. And I guess it's trying for me. I enjoy meeting different people. I think sometimes it helps me get a read on them, and it certainly brings more joy to my life because I get to meet interesting people. But I also have on and off and going back on again have used assessments with the clients that I work with because I have found the more I know myself, it can help me do a better job at what I do, understanding my strengths and my personality. And so I use that with some of the clients that I work with because I think it can help them as well.
Yeah, I noticed in your bio you say about Clifton Strengths, don't you? I've not used that, but I use Strengths Profile and Strengths Scope. But strengths-based tools in general, I think, are really great.
Oh, I do too. And one of the things that I like about them, because I, spent a week in the city years ago being MBTI certified, and I did an in-depth training with strengths several months ago. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it really sort of focuses on the things you're innately good at.
Mm,
And and the story that I like to tell people about myself is I am not a techie. My brain just doesn't quite work that way. And I mentioned having an online site, 20 years ago, before there was WordPress. And
mm.
it was HTML. And my husband, who's a techie and has always been kind of my tech guy, was trying to show me how to just do simple coding so that I could add an article or make a change. And I was so unable to do it that I was literally crying.
Oh,
Crying. And the thing is that, perhaps if I sat and did something in software and studied, I might get to here, but I'm never going to get to here. Now, I have friends who take classes in software development, writing programs for fun. Okay, that's great for them. But I think it is important, and it can be really helpful to capitalize on the things that you are good at
Yeah.
rather than struggle to do things that are just not a good fit for you.
Yeah, that's really true. I think we could spend I've got all these questions about strengths coming into my head now, so conscious of time, but I think the reason I like strengths profile, it's quite a straightforward tool, really easy to use, but it also talks about when you're kind of overplaying your strengths almost and you're almost exhausted from that. I think that's a really interesting concept as well, isn't it? Just because you're really good at something doesn't mean you should be doing it all the time as well. So it's that.
Well, yes, yes, I agree with you. And actually, I had some coaching, which was part of my training. I had coaching for me from a strengths
Mm,
coach, and one of the things that she told me to look at was really to look at. They focus on the top five, but also to really look at the top 10, and to
mm,
remember that even things that are at the bottom are, they're not necessarily weaknesses, but just things you're not as good at.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, so we've got another comment from Craig saying he could never go back to school now because his shorts and cap wouldn't fit. Excellent. Okay, so what about career highs? So, what would you say has been a career high for you, or highs? Got a few.
Well, when I got that job at the magazine, well, first of all, I will say when I graduated, when I got my bachelor's degree, because I was, as I said, I was a single woman working full time, going to school at night, and when I walked down that aisle and my cap and gown and got my diploma, um, that stands out in my mind as something that I accomplished. That was one of the happiest moments of my life. When I got the magazine job, and here I had been doing something that I actually went to school for, and that was my
Mm,
goal, to do that. But there are other things. So many things happen along the way. I remember when and it's funny. I was just talking to someone yesterday, a guest on my show. We were talking about having mastermind groups and having that support group. And I was telling him that although it wasn't technically a mastermind group, when I first started my resume writing business, which, as I said, has since evolved into other things, I was lucky to know quite a few people who had been in the business for a long time. And I was invited to a small group. It was all women, and really helping and advising each other. And I will never forget, when I started, like many people, I worked with clients at all different levels. And if I had an executive come to me, I would refer them because I was afraid.
mm,
And I had one of those women say to me, well, just pretend that you are this person's only option. And I did, and it kind of broke the fear. You do something you're afraid of. And I kind of got over that. And I found for me, working with executives is much easier. And those are primarily my clients today. But I mean, there's a lot of things. I got one certification that was hard to get, and when I got it, and I got the comments from the graders, which I actually keep a copy by my desk about talking about my work, that it was really good. Of course, that was a highlight. So there's a lot of them.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's a really good point about the executives, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people are probably going to be worried about working at people at kind of board level or whatever, because they're at that level. But what can you possibly teach them? But they're not an expert in everything, are they? That's the thing.
Absolutely. And, I'm sure you talk to people as well. I have clients come to me and they're like, well, I really find it hard to talk about myself, or I really don't know how to put that together because, it's strategy. You're not just sitting
Mm,
there typing. There's a lot of strategy involved. What you leave out is as important as what you include. And, what I say to them is, I can't do your job.
yeah.
So there is training behind it, and but it is true. And one thing that other people have said, but my husband has always said to me as I was changing careers and doing new things, is there's a pyramid.
Mm.
So you may be only here, but the people you work with are here. And as you rise, the people that are lower on the pyramid, they just don't know as much about that specifically as you do.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think also people forget that they're people almost. I know I've this great story of one of my a guy that I knew when I was in employed position. So he was chief information officer, and he said the problem is as soon as you get higher, people stop talking to you. So he started a new role. He said nobody showed me where the toilets were, and he's like, I still need to go to the toilet, but nobody does that kind of induction for people at that level. It's really funny. You don't think of things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what's we are short of time now. So what's next for you in your work? And what are you doing right now?
Well, taking the strengths training was kind of something that I started. I started shifting my company a year ago, and a little bit more than a year ago, because a lot of the work that I was doing was really personal branding, having the resume and the LinkedIn profile and all of those things sort of, all have the same message. And I started learning more about LinkedIn and getting into doing like some LinkedIn training with my clients. So the taking the strengths finder was a move in that direction, and to move myself more into coaching, than I have been, and sort of shifting, in that direction to, have more of my clients for coaching.
Excellent. Sounds really good. So I'm just going to put your page up on the screen quickly. So what's the best way of people getting in touch with you? Is it messaging you on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure.
Mm,
I'm happy to connect with anyone. If you mentioned that you saw me here with Sarah,
mm.
I'm happy to connect with you. I will say that there's a link, the top link on my profile. I do share a lot of information, but the link on there goes to YouTube with a lot of how-to videos. I don't do like pro bono work, so to compensate for that, I try to provide a lot of free information for people.
Sounds good. Excellent. Okay, so thanks again, Annette, for coming on. It's been really interesting. I really love hearing about people in their career. And yeah, so for future shows, I have got people coming on who some of them are really experienced in their careers, some have made big career changes. So February's all booked up, most of March is booked up. And next week I'm back with Gillian Whitney. So Gillian's in Las Vegas. And I'm switching to Thursdays from next week. So hopefully people can still make that. And Gillian is a video marketing coach who specializes in LinkedIn video. So thanks again, Annette, and thank you to everyone who's watching.
Thank
It's
you so
been
much for inviting me.
no problem at all. So see you all next week. Thank you very much. Bye.